the dry season here in the rainforest, in the southern rainforest, and then they spend the dry season in the northern savanna. Yes, it's a lot of distraction from. So the yellow-billed kite spend the dry season in the rainforest, and in the wet season you find them in the northern savanna within the same country. So those particular or group of birds are referred to as intra-African migrants. And we have those that move in between Europe and Africa. You know, when there is winter in Europe and temperatures are quite cold, they migrate down to Africa. Those ones are referred to as the Afrotropical Palearctic migrants. So they move between Europe and Africa. And we also have the third ones, which we refer to as the Nearctic migrants. Those ones move between North and South America. Okay, please, let's go to the next slide to actually look at why birds migrate. Why do birds migrate? Please scroll up a little bit. Thanks here. Yeah, a little bit. Can you just put it in presentation mode? Okay, so why birds migrate? It might be for food. For instance, the bird leaves the nest in the morning in search of food and comes back in the evening or sometime to rest again. So birds could migrate because of food. You go from a particular point to the next one to actually find food. And they also migrate because of bad weather. For instance, during winter in Europe, you know, the temperatures are extremely cold, and food is actually scarce during the period. And in order to overcome these challenges, birds migrate all the way from Europe down to Africa. So they migrate because of food, they migrate because of harsh weather conditions, they also migrate because of predation. You find out that at a particular period of the year that some species are predated, species of birds. As you could see on my left-hand side, this particular mama actually predating the bird in that area. So birds migrate to avoid predation because they know that this particular period of time, the predator will be there to feed on them. So they could migrate to avoid predation. Another reason why they do that or why they migrate is because of breeding. You find out that a particular bird would actually spend time here, but then during breeding season, they go to another place to breed, which is safe for them, which is richer in terms of food, in terms of the number of predators that could actually affect breeding. So they could migrate because of food, because of harsh weather condition, because of predation, and because of breeding. Okay, please, next slide. So migration is quite challenging, just like when human beings move. You know, if you travel from, say, Ibadan to Lagos, you know, it's quite challenging for you to actually travel as well. So it's also very challenging to birds. Although they fly, we see them fly easily. They face a lot of challenges during migration. And I normally give this analogy when I'm explaining migration in terms of birds. There was a time that I was doing my master's degree in Jos. And then, you know, because of the distance, at times as a student, I didn't have enough money. I had to come by road to all the way from Jos to Lagos. And during the movement, I stopped over in Nasarawa because of the long distance. So those places I was stopping are more or less referred to as stopover sites for migratory birds. It's very similar. It's just this analogy. Now, let's take, for instance, because I didn't have money to pay for flights. So I stopped over in Nasarawa, stopped over in maybe Lokoja or somewhere else. Let's take, for instance, Nasarawa State or Lokoja wasn't safe, so to speak. Maybe there's war or something happening. So it is similar to what birds actually face during migration in their stopover sites. So they went through that particular site, the stopover site last year, and hoping that everything will be okay this year. But then by the time they get there, they find out that the habitat has been cleared, similar to what I would have faced if there was war in Nasarawa State or maybe in Lokoja. So during migration, they face a lot of challenges in terms of exhaustion. You could see this particular bird, maybe due to global warming, the temperatures are quite harsh and they face exhaustion. They face collision, they collide with structures, with towers, telecommunication masts, with wind turbines. And then because of habitat destruction, they are also starved due to lack of food. They also face different diseases, and also they face illegal trapping, especially in their stopover and wintering sites. People just trap them and maybe for eating or maybe for next trips. So these are some of the challenges they face. Also natural disaster. You could see this particular bird affected by plastic pollution. Predation, it could be due to inexperience as well. But then importantly, because we are looking at light pollution this afternoon, you know, pollution could differ. It could be plastic pollution, it could be light pollution. But then in the next slide, we'll be looking at light pollution and how that affects birds. Then my colleague Victoria will be talking to us or will be enlightening us on what we can actually do to reverse the trend to ameliorate the impact of light pollution on birds. Please go to the next slide. So what is light pollution? It is the presence of unwanted, inappropriate, or excessive artificial lighting during the day or night. So light pollution could actually happen in the day or at night. But then it is important to actually distinguish between natural phenomena or like what we have here, which is wildfire, which is quite different because this is a natural disaster compared to artificial lighting. That is, human beings actually do this by introducing inappropriate, excessive lighting in our homes, in our offices, in factories. And this habit actually has a lot of impact on migratory birds. Please, let's go to the next slide. So like people will say, are you actually saying because of birds, we should not use light bulbs in our homes, or we should not use power or electricity? That's not what we are saying. But like I said in the first slide, it should be minimal. It's something that is sustainable, what you can actually use, especially indoors, not outdoors. The outdoor lighting affects birds mostly. So I said here that light pollution is positively correlated with urbanization and is increasing globally. You see, if you are in Ibadan or in Lagos, the amount of artificial lighting in Lagos is more than what you have in Ibadan. What is in Ibadan is more than what you have in medium-sized towns or cities like Iseyin or maybe in Erua. So as urbanization grows, as city increases in size, so also artificial lighting increases because you need power to do this, to do that, and then people abuse that. And it is now estimated that 80% of the world's population live under a lit sky. 80% of human population now live under lit sky with loss of unwarranted or unnecessary lighting of artificial lighting. It's even almost 100% in Europe and North America, with loss of lighting actually affecting birds. I said even in Nigeria, rural urban drift is not uncommon. You find out that even in Nigeria, people are now moving en masse from local areas, from villages down to cities. And because you have the city is now congested, you need more space, you need more lighting to actually make it sustainable or livable for people that are living. So there's rural urban drift, not only in Nigeria, it's a global phenomenon. A lot of people, because of their quest for better life, now live in cities. Then the amount of artificial light on the Earth's surface is increasing by at least 2% each year and could be much greater. You could see that because population growth, for instance, in Nigeria is at a 3.5% increment. Because of that population growth that is actually concentrated in urban areas, the amount of artificial lighting that is needed to actually power, to make the life sustainable also increases in size. But by contrasting with the night, light pollution is more severe at night. You know, I was saying earlier that artificial lighting could actually occur during daytime as well as during nighttime. But during daytime, you will agree with me that it is not that contrasting. And that is why artificial lighting at night is more severe for birds, because the contrast between dark and light makes it even more challenging for birds. Now, please go to the next slide. Now, effects of light pollution on birds. Light pollution alters natural patterns of light and dark in ecosystem. In some places in Europe, in the Americas, you find out that because of artificial lighting, it's except if you look at your time, it might be difficult at some point to actually know that it is already dark because of the amount of lighting from artificial bulbs. And this alters natural system. You know, birds, so to speak, they just use natural instinct. They don't have wristwatch and the rest of them to know that it is 6 p.m. and I have to go back to the nest. So it alters natural system, which has negative impact on birds. Say each year, light pollution contributes to the death of millions of birds due to collision resulting from disorientation. You see, because of artificial lighting, which is in contrast to natural system, it makes it difficult for birds to actually orientate, to actually locate their direction. You know, most of these birds, they use celestial bodies like for migration. Some of them even migrate at night. That moves mostly at night. So they use all these celestial bodies, but then if you light, and because of that, it makes it very difficult for them to actually orientate, to know their direction, because they are used to this particular site. They know that when they go maybe a few kilometers from this, then it is dark, it is forest area, but then the whole place is now converted and lighted, which makes it difficult for birds. So it leads to a lot of collision with towers, with tall buildings, with wind turbines in developed countries of the world. They collide with this object because they can't find them. And why actually trying to locate this, to reorientate and locate their direction back, they tend to cycle around the illuminated object. They look around to find their ways and do that. In doing that, they deplete their energy because they have energy reserves to actually power themselves to do this, to identify their way, their track they have made. So they get exhausted, they deplete their energy, and because they don't have energy again to maneuver, they get predated. And actually, there's fatal collision with buildings. And you know that results in loss of death. And even for resident birds, if you light up areas for people that live maybe in places that are a little bit vegetated, if you light it at night, you find out that the lighting will actually attract insects. And if insects are attracted, you find out that some species of bird that naturally should be diurnal, you find out that they will be there at night trying to hit the insects. And you know, because these things are some sort of a cascading effect, if birds go to where it is lighted at night to eat insects, then something, maybe mama or a bigger bird that will predate on that bird will also come around to predate it. So by doing this, you are invariably increasing predation rates through artificial lighting, because the lighting attracts insects, insects attract birds, and predators are attracted to where you have the birds, and the birds get killed. And these are some of the challenges that birds face. So please, next slide. So in conclusion, I said natural darkness has conservation values similar to those provided by clean water, air, and soil. So we should try to maintain a clean environment. We should make it where there should be darkness, we should make it dark. Especially, I don't want to dwell so much on what we should do in terms of remedies, which Victoria will talk about. Maybe putting off the lights at night, what we call security lights there. All these things have impact on migratory birds. And we also need to raise awareness about the impact of light pollution on migratory birds. So the next slide, which is to acknowledge Wasi for actually inviting me to present this talk, and also people that are here listening to me. I hope that we can all brainstorm and see what we can do after listening to Victoria to actually ameliorate the situation, which is very impactful to birds, to migratory birds. Like I used to say, because of climate change, global warming, and the rest of them, migration is a phenomenal event. Is a very interesting event that I don't want to come to a halt. For instance, if the temperatures are getting hotter, the global warming is increasing, then you find out that maybe some birds that should actually migrate will not migrate again, or they will not travel long as they used to do. And if a bird is not traveling long, then probably we won't have such. For instance, pediatric migrants in Nigeria. And if we don't have that, then the whole system is collapsing. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adewale. We appreciate you. This is indeed an interesting presentation. I'm sure via this we've learned the impact of light pollution towards birds, and I'm sure that we'll be encouraged to dim our lights, for birds, so that they can also be able to fly to a place where they will be comfortable and cohabit with us. So I'm going to be calling on our next speaker, Miss Victoria, to for her own presentation, so that after her presentation, we will leave the floor for those that want to contribute on the first topic and the second topic. So Ms. Victoria, please, you can have the floor now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ma. I'm glad to be here. And I also want to appreciate Wasi for inviting me for this webinar. Also, let me appreciate Mr. Wale Aweyemi. He has been a great mentor, and I'm glad that he's also here. Please, Ma, can you share the screen for the slide?
Okay. Document is opening. So just 1 minute. All right. Here we go. Can you all see the screen now?
Yes, ma'am. All right. Good afternoon once again, everybody. My name is Victoria Anyoshola, and I will be talking more on the responses and remedies of light pollution. In this presentation, I'll be looking more into from the aspect of a zoologist, although I will still be mentioning the effect or the responses of light pollution to birds. Please, can you go to the next slide, ma'am? Okay, what is light pollution? Light pollution can be defined as introduction by humans, either directly or indirectly, of artificial light into the environment that has adverse impacts on species. Avoidable light pollution refers to light flow emitted at night by artificial light sources, which are inappropriate in intensity, direction, or spectral range, or when artificial lighting is used in particular sites such as observatories, natural areas, or sensitive landscapes. For instance, when we use light excessively in urban, this is mostly seen in urban areas. In urban areas, we use lights, we have street lights, even at home, we put security lights, and all this is affecting the birds at night, affecting animals that are nocturnal. Another thing about is that International Dark Sky Association defines light pollution as an adverse effect of artificial lights, including sky glow, glare, light trespass, light cluster, decreased visibility at night, and energy waste. So I'll be discussing more about types of light pollution, and I'll look at the responses of animals, including both birds, butterflies, and other species of animals, their responses, and we'll also look at the remedies. Please, to the next slide, ma. Now we have types of light pollution. We have what we call light trespass. We have over illumination. We have glare. We have clusters. We have sky glow. So I'll pick them one after the other and try to buttress some of those types of light pollution so that we can see where, as individuals or as organizations, where we've been using this particular light to pollute the environment, to affect our animals and organisms around us. So what do I mean by light trespass? This occurs when unwanted light enters one's property, for instance, by shining over a neighbor's fence. A common light trespass problem occurs when a strong light enters into the window of one's home from outside, causing problems such as sleep deprivation or blocking of an evening view. Now, this mostly happens in urban areas, as I mentioned earlier, when we have light being used. This light trespass can be unknowingly when you have direction of light coming into homes. You know, sometimes it happens and we try to say, okay, who is that? And we just try to look out. We might not be able to see what's going on outside because the light has penetrated into our own environment. And that also can affect the organisms that are around us. The second type is over illumination. This is the excessive use of light. Now, when we use light excessively, yes, we need light at some point, probably when it's dark, to see where we are going so that we will not collide with something. But when we use them excessively, maybe when we are supposed to put them off, the light is still on, it affects the nocturnal animals, because when they see this light, they get attracted to that light, and in the process, they might be harmed by predators. In the process, they might collide with something. In the process, they might lose their bearing. They might be disoriented. So this is also an aspect of light pollution. It's a type of light pollution where we excessively use light. Another type of light pollution is glare. Glare is often the result of excessive contrast between bright and dark areas in the field of view. Glare is particularly an issue in road safety, as bright or badly shielded lights around roads may partially blind drivers or pedestrians unexpectedly. We have types of glares, actually. We have the blinding glare. This blinding glare, it comes as a result of exposure. When we expose ourselves, like staring in, for instance, into the sun, we are trying to look at
Another type.
we are
Bring
trying to
another
look
type.
at
No,
we are
leave that
trying
one.
to
Bring
look
another
at
type. Hold on.
the we are staring into the sun. This can actually cause a blinding glare, and this can also affect animals. As long as we as human beings, we know we are higher animals, it affects us. talk less of animals like birds, talk less of animals like insects and all that, it also affects them. So another type of glare is the disability glare. Now, for instance, I know this happens to most people that drive at night. When you are driving to your various homes and there's an upcoming vehicle with the full light on, sometimes it affects our eyes. Might not be able to see what's upcoming, and then we try to slow down. Looking at that effect, it also, birds that moves along that path at night can also be affected. It can also disorient them from knowing where to go to, and then they miss their pathway. Then other type of light pollution is cluster. Cluster refers to excessive glimpses of light, which may generate confusion, distract from obstacles, and potentially cause accidents. So this is also a form of light pollution that affects both humans and animals. Another type is sky glow. Sky glow is refers to a glow effect that can be seen in overpopulated areas. It is a combination of all lights reflected from what it has illuminated escaping up into the sky and from all badly directed light in that area. So this is another form of, or another types of light pollution that is seen in our environment. Next slide, ma'am. Okay, so I will also look at the impact of light pollution. Now, impact of light pollution affect both plants and animals. Now, for the plants measure. Please, can you still go back to the next slide? I'm still on the slide 4. Okay, so one of the impacts of light on plants is that we have plants that prefer, they have a longer night length than the day length, and they do all their processes, all their metabolism throughout the night. And when we have a longer day, for instance, when you have illumination, and this disrupts the activities of some insects that help them in pollination. For instance, we have an example of moths that moves, they're nocturnal, they move and they help in pollinating some of these plants at night. And when we have too much illumination at night, this disrupts their movement because they tend to feel that it's still during the day because of the presence of the light. Then at that point, they're unable to move towards the plants to help in pollination. And at the same time, it also disrupts their movement. It disrupts their navigation. It disrupts everything that deals with even their reproduction. It disrupts it because when the night pollinators are unable to pollinate the plants, it reduces the species. It brings about the decline in the species of that plant because they're unable to reproduce, and also brings a long-term change in that ecology of the environment. It can be in the forest, it can be in our urban areas. Another impact is on animals. Next slide, ma. Light pollution affects animals also. It affects birds, it affects aquatic organisms. It affects them in such a way that they are unable to reproduce, they are unable to navigate, and also it changes their competitive interaction. It affects their predator-prey relationship. There's always this ecosystem balance in our environments, in the ecosystem. Every organism is important, every animal is important, plants too are important. And when we have excessive light pollution, it alters the ecosystem. It alters the way it's supposed to be, the natural way it's supposed to be. It also affects their animal physiology. So in the next slide, I would dive more on the responses of animals to light pollution. Next slide. So responses of animals to light pollution. Ecological light pollution has demonstrable effects on behavioral and population ecology of organisms in natural setting. The first one is the spectral composition and sensitivity. Now, sensitivity to varies greatly across organisms. Its research has shown that it's constantly completing results about these studies, but it has been established that when you have excessive light at night, it affects sea turtles nesting, because when this animal wants to nest, they prefer to go to places that are dark. But when they see lightning, it affects their nesting. They prefer to go to places that are more dark, that are very dark and not exposed to humans. And when they have excessive light, it affects their nesting. It also affects their hatching behaviors. This lighting method only considers the spectral sensitivity of a species. Now, there's a study that shows that the red or orange chromatic artificial light at night does not really affect some species, but is looking at just one particular species, not considering other species. So the sensitivity of other species too is important. When trying to solve this solution, solve the problem of light pollution, we also need to consider other animals like the insects, the birds, and not diving into just one particular species and looking at what only saves others. We also need to look at what saves other type of animals. So as I'm saying, we have the lighting method only considers the spectral sensitivity of a single species within a coastal communities. Why many efforts to reduce the effect of ALAN on wildlife are focused on altering spectral composition. These efforts may be misguided as organisms differ strictly in wavelength sensitivity. So as I said, each organisms in the environment actually have their own wavelength, light wavelength sensitivity in which they can respond to. When it's too much, it affects them and thereby causing issues or problems for them. Next slide, ma'am. So another response of animals to light pollution is migratory and phototaxis behavior. Behavior and movement ecology of diverse organisms exposed to artificial light at night has been a topic of great interest among ecologists. As light pollution can alter activity levels, mating behavior, nesting preference, and foraging patterns that they're exposed to. Now, phototaxis, or the attraction of organisms to light, has been observed in multiple organisms ranging from moths to birds and bats. In fact, light is even utilized to attract and trap mosquitoes by many organizations, including Center for Disease Control and Prevention. So this light affects the migratory pattern of some species of animals. As we know that some animals can respond positively to light, while some animals do not respond properly to light, it leads to their own decline when we have excessive use of light. And it also affects their migratory pattern. For instance, when you have excessive light in an environment, animals are supposed to migrate in the night, stays, because they observe that everywhere is still lighting. So it actually affects their movement. And by the time they realize that it's almost daytime and they start moving, they can be exposed to predator. So these responses to light pollution is really, really affecting the ecosystem, and the ecologists are trying to make a lot of research to see how they can reduce this impact on animals generally. Next slide. So another response is in terms of their communication. Now we have animals that communicate using light, and when you using bioluminescence, and when there's excessive light in the environment, it affects or it even reduces the visibility of this communication between them. For instance, we have in fireflies, when we have light, most times we notice that we don't really see fireflies in the environment again, because the excessive light pollution in the environment has actually affected the visibility of this particular species. So visual communication within and between species may be influenced by artificial night lighting. Some species use light to communicate and are therefore especially susceptible to disruption. For instance, you have in female glowworms, they attract their males up to 45 meters away with bioluminescent flashes. So when we have light pollution, the males will not be able to see this illuminescence, and by that way there won't be reproduction occurring, because since the male can attract the female can attract the male, we can't have increase in population, there can't be reproduction. Also, it affects competition. Artificial night lighting could disrupt the interaction of groups of species that show resource partitioning across illumination gradients. For example, in natural communities, some foraging times are partitioned among species that prefer different levels of light. Changes in competitive communities occur as diurnal species move into the night light niche. Some set applies to reptiles and so on. So diurnal species, because of the excessive use of light and because it's already affecting the environment, it affects their own responses too, because when they see that it's still bright, the environment is still well lightened, they continue their activities. And by so doing, it affects other animals that move in the night, that feed in the night. So when they do that, there's this disruption in their feeding patterns, because animals that are supposed to feed in the night, they're unable to feed early enough because of the presence of light, while the ones that feed during the day continues their foraging behavior because of the presence of light in that environment. And at this, it disrupts the foraging pattern and the foraging patterns among species. Another response of animals to light is in terms of their predation. Now, this is in line with the in competition too. When we have diurnal species foraging longer than the time they're supposed to spend, they are prone to death. They can be eaten by predators, because, for instance, let's see insects. When we turn on our lights, our security lights at home, we notice that insects are attracted to the light. And before we know it, we see reptiles like wall gecko being attracted to the light, thereby feasting on these insects. And this can also bring about other types of animals because they're attracted to that light. So it affects animals that are supposed to be diurnal, and instead of them resting at night, they forage till late night because of the presence of the light in the environment, and it reduces them because they are prone to predators at such time. Next slide, ma'am. Next slide. Okay. All right. Another response of animals to light pollution is in terms of their endocrine dysregulation. Now, light pollution is known to affect the hormones regulation and have been considered as many consequences of artificial light at night exposure likely act through endocrine pathways, thus linking molecular processes to downstream physiologies and behaviors. For instance, there's a research carried out and it shows that the exposure of artificial light at night to tree swallows affected their provisioning, their fledging, and reproductive sources. Also, it affects their cort level, that is the glucocorticoid level in avians that are mostly found in aves. So because of the excessive exposure to artificial light at night, it affected the provisioning, the fledging, and also it affects the eggs hatched, because when they carry out the research, it was discovered that when the bird exposure to artificial light at night decreased the parental provisioning rate, and it negatively affected the likelihood that all the eggs hatched. So these are part of the responses that animals have to this like excessive use of light at night. Another thing is that artificial light at night exposure also reduces the nestling baseline. It increases stress level in the circulation of the corticoids in the bloodstream. It increases it, and in that process, they can be easily stressed. And when they are stressed, they won't be able to perform their regular activities. They won't be able to go through the normal life cycle that they're supposed to have. It affects it, and in that process, it can also causes reduction or decline in the population of such animals. Next slide, ma'am. So now, what are the remedies? Part of the things we can, because we are humans, we are the one that created, or we are the one that introduced this light pollution into the environment, thereby affecting our animals in their natural habitats. Some of the things we can do is that we can utilizing light source of minimum intensity necessary to accomplish light purpose. Now, when we need light, yes, but we need to look at the importance of that light. If it's something that after the usage we turn it off, yes, we can easily do that, and thereby reducing the excessive usage of light. That can also help in reducing light pollution in the environment. Another thing is turning lights off, using a timer or occupancy sensor, or manually when not needed. So now, yes, in lights, but they can be timed. For instance, when moving out, there's some I've seen when there's nobody there, is turned off. But when someone moves there, it senses that there's presence of a person, so the light comes on, and immediately the person leaves the place, the light is off again. So this can also be used in our street lights and in our environment, in our houses, that those lights can be censored, and it will help in reducing the light pollution. Also, another remedy is improving light features so that they direct their light more accurately towards where it is needed and with less side effects. Now, for instance, we have in these advertising billboards, our street lights, if it's possible to just direct, if the organizations, I know those that they install those things, they need it for a purpose, but they can easily direct those lights in such a way that it doesn't cause nuisance, it doesn't have any side effect to the environment. Just direct it to where it is needed, and when they're done, it's being put off. Another remedy is adjusting the type of light used so that the light waves likely to cause severe light pollution problems. As I mentioned in my presentation, I said something that some species, they react to different waves, they have sensitivity to different wavelengths of light. So if it's in an environment where we know that, okay, we have some particular species of animals, particular species of birds in this environment, and we know the kind of wavelength they can be attracted to, or the kind of wavelength that can affect them, we can use that to, that can also help us to know the kind of light we'll use in our environment, the kind of light we'll use in our national parks, the kind of light we'll use in rehabilitation centers for birds or animals, so that it will not cause any problem or adverse effects as we move on. And the last remedy that I looking is evaluating existing light plans and redesign all the plans depending on whether existing light is actually needed, to see if the light is or evaluated, to see if these some of the lights that are being installed are needed in the places where it is being placed. If they are not needed, they can be easily removed, and also be looked into, and that will help in reducing this light pollution in the environment. Slide 12, ma. Okay, so with this slide, I'll be concluding. Part of the remedies to light pollution is, as I've mentioned, we can, okay. So looking at the future consideration and conservative efforts, although strategies for narrating light pollution effects on wildlife are at the forefront of current research efforts, there are many steps and obstacles that remain. Alternative methods, including shielding or dimming light sources, altering spectral composition, and limiting the time lights have been suggested by International Dark Sky Association. However, much is still unknown about the total extent and nature of light pollution effects in understudied ecosystem, and indirect or synergetic effects of artificial light at night and other stress on habitats and organismal interaction. So with this presentation, I believe that those that have listened to me can, and those that will be listening later, I believe is also recorded, can look into this and see a way or a policy that can be used to reduce the effect of light pollution on our wildlife, and also to improve the conservative efforts in the environment. And the usage of light in our parks can also be looked into. With this, I want to appreciate Awasi for inviting me, and for everyone that is present today for listening to this presentation. Thank you for accepting me the way I am. I appreciate you all. Thank you, ma'am.
So thank you so much, Ma. I appreciate you. I'm sure this we have learned a lot on the remedies we can effect for this light pollutions, and how these animals respond to light pollution. We can see that we have different animals that respond to different ways on light. We're hoping that with all this effort, we could, come together and and see how, we could reach out to the necessary bodies that could help us effect these changes that we actually need, so that you know, birds can actually fly freely at night. And on this section, I would like to call on Mr. Bibitayo to contribute just a little to this presentation. Please, Mr. Bibitayo, you can have the floor. Thank you. Hello, Mr. Bibitayo.
Yes, I'm here. I'm just trying to work on my system.
Okay, sir.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. And one very good thing is, you have this kind of joy when your boss is anchoring a program. And today I'm more blessed because the two speakers are my bosses, Mr. Wale Aoyemi. Dr. Wale is a mentor, and he did a lot when it comes to me growing in this ornithology of a thing. And also, Victoria is the immediate past coordinator. She handed over to me on this. There's a project ongoing, and I just want to appreciate the two of them for doing justice to the topic that's been given to them. Yes, light pollution, as explained by Dr. Oyemi, he did marvelously well in putting us through. Fine. One thing I know about him, I like about him is he likes to scientists. He has spoken in such a way that both scientists and citizen scientists will understand the basics of what he is talking about. It's a serious issue these days, and I keep wondering how we want to correct this defect that light is actually causing to biodiversity, especially bird migration. As small as my living room is, I find it very difficult to cope with a particular center light. Anytime I want to watch the news, I prefer to switch it off. And I keep wondering, if I find it difficult to cope with this light and the TV screen, how much more all these, LED lights that is capable of lightening a whole street. Dr. Oyemi talked about countries like Europe and the likes that the streets, you can't even differentiate between day and night. And I keep wondering how difficult it is for all these birds and animals to maneuver their way in such an environment. And we keep talking about extinction rates, reduction in population, mortality, low reproduction and the likes. And we don't know some of these our activities called anthropogenic activities affect the population of some of these animal species we're talking about. So as human, as small as this group is, we have a lot to do. And it's a pity we push everything back to the government. But this time around, I just want us to look inwards and see, how can we help this biodiversity? How can we help some of these wildlife species? Knowing fully well that the disappearance of a particular species has adverse effects on human life. So if these animals are gone, then humans, we should be ready to move, to join them too. It's as simple as that. And for this World Migratory Bird Day, looking at light pollution, I think is a wake-up call to every one of us. And from this, our own corner, what can you do? What can I do to help the natural environment? Once again, I want to congratulate Wasi for hosting this program. And I also want to appreciate our lead speakers, my orgas in biodiversity conservation, that have really done justice to the topic before them. Once, thank you, Dr. Awoyemi, and thank you, Ms. Victoria Anyoshola. We appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate your contributions. Right now, I'm giving room to everyone that has question. If you have a question, please unmute yourself and ask the question, or you raise your hand so that I can call on you. We just have 5 minutes to do that. If you have a question, I wanted to call on Mr. Taiwo Adams to also give us his contributions, but I noticed that he went out, but now he's in. Mr. Taiwo Adams, please, if you can hear me, can you just give us a brief contributions to the topic of today? Hello, Mr. Taiwo.
Taiwo is muted.
Yes, he's muted. Can you unmute yourself, Mr. Taiwo, please? Okay. Please, if there is anyone that has a question, our able speakers are.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Taiwo. Please.
Sorry, I just came back into the meeting. But yeah, I would like to chip in one or two things. I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, even if we can't fully, I know it will be hard to really convince people to switch off the lights, which is not what we are saying, but at least dim the lights. Perhaps when we are indoors, we need the lights to be on. Maybe we could use the close the blinds or the curtain. And another thing that I think we can do is to perhaps, if we have lightings outside our houses, I'm sure that the lights with lower watts, they wouldn't shine as bright as the ones with higher watts. So we can, it's all about making compromises, really. So if we can shift a bit so that we can accommodate others. So if you can't sacrifice 100%, you should be able to at least take 50%. So how about we set up our lights in a way that it should shine to the ground rather than the sky? Because I know that some lightings, the way they shine, because birds are flying across, it will definitely affect them. But how about if we make it more bird friendly, put it in such a way that it shines to the ground rather than the sky. There's also something that I need to clarify. I don't know if Mr. Oyemi can help us with that. Do we have lights, different colors of lights? Do we have the ones that really impact birds the most? Maybe a red light, it might be more friendly with birds compared to a white light or a yellow light, so to say. So I'm just being curious. I don't know if there's anything like that. Perhaps the color of the lighting can affect, has more impact on the birds.
Yeah, Taiwo, I can't answer that specifically, but I know anything that is contrasting to darkness, it will have effect. But then the amount of lightness could also, I'm not sure specifically if that is very important. But I think the most important thing is anything that would alter darkness when it should be dark will affect birds. So dimming it, if there is a way we can actually reduce the amount of lightness, so to speak, I think that will also be. So I think that's what I can say.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Taiwo Adams, for that contributions that you've given there. I like that part you said, let's make it friendly for them. You know, how will it feel if these birds are the ones that are making us uncomfortable to exist? It wouldn't feel right. So we have to just make sure that we found a way to make them also feel comfortable in their own existence. If there is any other contribution, please, can you mute yourself? Sorry. If there are any other contributions, like, please, if you have any other contribution, can we just, or question? This is the time for that. There are contributions or question. Any question, any contributions? Okay. To this effect, I think there is no question and no contributions. Since no one is saying anything and raising hand, I'm sure we all have understood well. The presentation is well explained, and the thing is that I would want to encourage.
Sorry, I was having issue controlling my speaker and Bluetooth device. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Obadara. Okay. I'm sorry for barging in, but I realized you were already moving away from contribution. So, and I wanted to just add something.
Okay, go
ahead. Let me apologize first. Let me apologize first for coming in late.